To me, having played a game 100 hours is absolutely nothing. And when I first started being a TV editor, I struggled so much with creativity and creative writing. Creativity is recombination of known things. I basically take something, combine it with something, it is unusual, and people are like, wow, that's new. Authors tend to put way too much meaning into stuff that we write. Super grim world, and then the guys dropped in and were like, la, 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 la. Getting back up is almost more important than being able to get up in the first place. The best advice that I've been given was that you are not the only one that's feeling this.
Welcome back to Artist Insights. I'm Elena, creative nomad, and we are in Tokyo, Japan. My interview partner for this episode is known for being cute and approachable. He's a creative director and founder, but he's also so much more. Hauke Gerdes.
Thanks for having me. Hey.
Yeah, Hauke, I'm so pumped that you said yes to our interview. And
thanks for asking.
Arigato gozaimasu. Okay. Okay, Hauke, please introduce yourself. Who are you? What are you doing for a living at the moment? And what excites you?
Yeah, I'm Hauke Gerdes. I'm sorry about the pronunciation. I'll never correct anyone, but generally people do not do that right. Yeah, I'm Hauke. I used to work mostly in Germany for TV. I basically started my career for MTV Germany back in the day. That's possibly also, that project transitioned into Rocket Beans TV. That is why, or if German-speaking audiences know me, that is where they know me from usually. Then I've worked for public service TV for quite a while. I did some indie video games. I did some pitches for any form of media that is in any way narrative or interactive, which is not that much. Video games are one of them. And for some reason, for quite a while, I did not really work on video games directly, but that is what I've been doing most recently. That's also why I'm creative director and founder. The company is called Blankhans, and that's currently my main job, but I also do stuff like video production. I am to some degree what people would call an influencer, I guess, because I have done like typical live streaming. I've produced video media where I was the main host basically, but over the last month that has decreased quite significantly, and now I'm more of a creative behind the scenes.
You're also a writer.
So when I started, I was basically, it's always a little hard because in German there's specific terms, in English it's an editor, but I am a writer and editor, or was a writer and editor for a TV show, where basically we made video game based content, did little skits in between those review-like segments of the show, and those skits also included some typical slapstick or like some very consciously, I think we call it flat humor. Some people in English understand that term, so I'll just use that. Just that was to lighten up the general idea of a video game review. And I was the person basically testing these games, writing these reviews, then editing them together with an editor. Back in the day, TV actually had separate editors. And I was then the person that reviewed all of that. And in the end, one of the segments on the show was what I basically created. That was my job. And that helped me to transition more and more into general creative writing, which was mostly video form based, TV based. But the project that we worked for was, as I said, MTV Germany, and that show was quite successful, but MTV back then decided, and some people might recall the time where MTV completely became irrelevant, and they decided we want to be irrelevant now, and in Europe we are not going to spend any money on any form of content anymore. So basically they pulled the plug on any productions. We were back then actually the most successful German production, which was good for us, but didn't save us. And back then, I think we were 25 people in the company back then, and I was just one of the employees.
Game one was 25 people.
Yeah, I think 25 people. The website and the show, and like including editors, everything, because what back then the company was still called Riesenbuhai, or like now Rocket Beans TV, was already trying to make an effort to pull more and more people into their own team. In the beginning, we were completely outsourcing video production, video editing was in a different room. We had separate editors that were only called in once a week or 2 days a week for the editing of the show. And we were weekly format, later bi-weekly, but weekly, where we had like a double rotation. One editor would work on a piece, finish it off, and then go to the next one. And we needed quite some stuff to keep up a weekly rotation of a 25 to 30 minute piece.
Which is actually quite a lot with like 25 people.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a lot of people. Like we produced per person, I think 5 minutes of full edited video content per week, which is a lot by standards of TV production, at least for Germany. It's different for every country. Japan has an even higher rate, America a lower rate, but yeah, well, that depends on the production, but yeah. Anyways, basically that transitioned into Rocket Beans TV, which was back then the first and only fully independent licensed 24/7 TV channel on the internet. So we had a full-on license in Germany. We were allowed in the European market to be broadcasted, which is per country different, but a lot of people might know that in the States, for example, radio is highly regulated, while TV is a little less.
Yeah.
And it depends on the state, I think. But in Germany, it is highly regulated who is technically allowed to send something over like any form of video media.
Could you say that were you excited about video games back then? Or?
Yeah, I guess my measurement is completely off for what someone is who's excited or deeply into video games.
Yeah.
I considered myself a casual gamer.
Mm-hmm.
Even now that I worked in the studio, when my co-founders asked me how much games I play, I said more of a casual person. And then when we first started comparing hours that we played, is when I realized, like, to me, having played a game 100 hours is absolutely nothing. And at 400, I would say I casually played that game.
Okay.
Like at 1,000 is where I would say I actually invested time into this game. Like before that, I would not dare to say I really know this game. Because most of the games I played are online games, which was also kind of interesting because in the context of Game 1, I was neither a big console player nor a big single player enthusiast.
Okay.
I love online games. I think anything that is social about games is the best aspect about them. So I ended up generally being handed trash. Even though we barely did any like real trash. We did like 2 or 3 games per show.
Yeah.
We were the biggest video media back then in Germany, which is maybe for context because a lot of people underestimate. Germany is one of the biggest entertainment markets on the planet. Like Spotify, for example, is the biggest market is Germany. And like in international comparison, we are really big on entertainment media. Germans spend a lot of money on video games. Of course, there is bigger competitors, but in Europe, it's quite significant to be the biggest, even though we were German speaking. Which of course like makes it less interesting for French market, which is also relevant, the Turkish market, which is very relevant, and like, yeah. But anyways, that allowed me to play a lot of games that I was not very interested in, which I generally loved, because it frees you from a lot of expectation. You can just do whatever you want. People will not be mad if you don't like Call of Duty, because like they are. If you don't like what they like, they will be angry with you. But if no one really cares about a game that much, you can do whatever you want. Or I was handed online games, MMORPGs, MMOs, survival games. That's what I played a lot. Games where you sink an incredible amount of time into games, where other people enjoy them with you, anything social. I like that.
And that is basically what you're working on at the moment.
We are building a social survival sandbox game, which people call an MMO, and we can do whatever we want. We will not get rid of that term. We do not like it because people make MMO into MMORPG, like MMO, a massive multiplayer online game, and MMORPG, a massive multiplayer online role-playing game. Neither of those are technically the right term to define our game, but we just gave up and said, yeah.
Because it's a mixture, or because it's something...
Technically, I mean, it's hard to define, definitions vary, but most people argue that an MMO is when 50 people at minimum at the same time play on one server and are without limitations able to interact with each other. That is a vague limitation. For example, Battlefield would be an MMO by that definition. And then you can add more and more layers on top of that definition. By that definition, we are not an MMO. We do not have 50 live players on one server, even though we have parts in the game where it is possible to have that amount, or you can generally interact with way more than those. Because even if they're not online, you can text them, and on different servers are people. Like let's say you are in a world with 20 and 20 others are on a different server, and you can still talk to them and meet them in a social hub, which technically kind of makes it more players, but it's not really. That's like saying, like, yeah, anything that has a lobby is an MMO. But yeah, we just, whenever someone says it's a survival MMO, we gave up and say, yeah, it's a survival MMO.
We are talking about your game now, but we haven't really said the title of the game.
Oh, Coreborn. Blankhans is the name of the studio.
Would you like to tell a little bit more about Coreborn?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I love the project.
Yeah.
Coreborn is a social survival sandbox game. It is basically the idea that there's 2 main genres that I really care about and like, or that we as founders really cared about and liked, and that is survival games and MMOs. That's the 2 things I played the most. And like I said, the most is starting at when we come into the 1,000 hours or more digits. And like, for example, World of Warcraft, rookie numbers. Like we're talking about months of actual playtime, like non-stop playtime. Yeah. But I think there will be people who are like, But anyways, basically we said that we like survival games, and one of my co-founders, Renee, has produced several MMOs in the past. From Hello Kitty Online to EverQuest, he has worked on... Yeah, really great. I did the review for that game back in the day for Game 1. The other founder is Marcus, who founded G-Portal, which is now the biggest private server provider in the world. And so we realized that often genres keep growing, even though there is something that makes them less approachable. For example, World of Warcraft did for MMOs something where it just casualized certain aspects. It made it a lot easier to get into it. A lot of people will not know, for example, Ragnarok Online, which was a very big MMO.
Never played it, but...
Yeah, but it was not that easy to get into. Certain aspects were hard to understand. The whole server is a wonderful game. I loved playing it. It was not that easy for people to understand. World of Warcraft made that a lot easier. The concept was easy. The world was approachable. It was incredibly easy to drop in. Not very punishing if you died and stuff like that. And some very, very smart design decisions. And we said survival is a booming genre. There is incredible amounts of survival games coming out, and all of them are fun. Whenever I play one, I love it for about a month. And then the content runs dry, and the people on my server stop playing. And there's things that are just so outdated. Like, I want to play Rust. I will start Rust, and then there's a list of servers that have names like EU West 1x7 Night x X Drop X22 Voice Only No PvP Town something. I'm like, what the hell? I do not know what any of these words mean. I can't understand. I'm not into the game yet, and it feels excluding. So I'll just click on official server, and I'll be dropped on a server where I either play with people that are also newbies, which is a great experience, but most likely I also play with some people who just like killing newbies.
It's a lot of trolls.
Yeah, generally. I mean, it's survival, like it's online games, and one person generally, if they want to, tries to ruin the experience of 100 others. But anyway, still, Rust, amazing game. I think one of the best survival games that is out currently. Makes a lot of right decisions. But we said, why not just press play? And that's it. We matchmake you. You do not need to pay for servers. There is no servers that you see. You just play. We matchmake, which means we basically see your account, look at some of its values, and put it on a server that we think fits you. For example, you're a new player, you've never played the game. We just assign you to a world.
Oh, okay.
With 19 others. This seems like a tiny detail, but it is gigantic in its impact on the game, because it means that, let's say I'm already on the server, I'm playing, and someone stops playing on my server. Less content is created, no more people to interact with. Immediately, once you start the game, we will put you on my server. Someone new is there immediately. The server never dies. People keep asking, I build a house, what if my server dies? There is no dying of server, unless we have 0 players, which might happen. Then the other big advantage is that we can generally matchmake you with people who you will participate best in their content with. For example, if 5 new players start right now, we will put all 5 on a new server. With 15 players that are also, like, on a server can be 200. We're talking about the CCU, like the concurrent users that are playing right now. But we'll put you on a server where there's people that are actually in the same progress or have the same progress that you have. They just started, they maybe want to set up a town together. You have someone to directly play with, but you also have people with more experience that you can look at and say, hey, that's cool, how do I interact with them? And then we set up the game in a way that both parties have benefits from interacting with each other. It doesn't matter if you've already played 500 hours. Someone that just started is still a benefit to your experience. In PvP games, player versus player, which means for people who are not that into video games, players can kill other players in the game. It's a great motor for content. Basically means I never know what's gonna happen. I never know if someone comes over, destroys my house, or kills me, takes my stuff, whatever. That is very toxic for new players though. And I think Rust, for example, is still struggling, even though they are doing so many smart things with making that experience less shitty.
I've never played Rust.
You drop in, you will be killed immediately by someone. That person will teabag you and say, welcome to Rust, ha ha ha, and that's gonna happen 15 times most likely. And it's an amazing game. Once you got past that first frustration, there is so many smart decisions in Rust. There's a good reason that game has been going on for several years now. But Rust, for example, saw one of the biggest spikes in influencer activity that you can imagine. It's been everywhere. Considering that, it should have been exploded, in my opinion, but like, this is just personal opinion. And I think that initial gap is hard to overcome for a lot of players. And we're trying to make that easy and smooth. We say player-generated content is something, but we try to not make it toxic or destructive. We say if you meet someone, it is always a good experience. Seeing another player is content. Interacting with them will enhance your experience. Can I play it single player? Yes, you can, but you will not enjoy it as much as if you interact with others. This is a social game.
Because?
For example, in most role-playing games, you focus your character on a specific field. And that is where the MMO aspect comes in. We do not have classes. Like World of Warcraft has a mage and a warrior and anything, but we will force you, but we'll guide you towards decisions that make your character unique, like a role that you play, like a role-playing game. There will be things you're not good at. You can't be perfect at everything at the same time, but you might meet someone that is a great carpenter while you're a great farmer, and then both of you decide to build a barn together. You do not need to be forever the friend of that person, or you don't even need to talk to them necessarily. It's totally fine if both of you just happen to come and build a town together. And a town for us is like a social structure that you set up in the world and start building things. You claimed it, it is yours together. What that hierarchy is completely up to you. One of you is the mayor and the other is just living there, or both of you are mayors or whatever.
But you have to defend it together?
Yes, from NPC that attack your town. No other players can attack anything that you build.
Okay.
There is zero PvP in our game. I do not believe that PvP is the best mechanism in a survival game. I understand that people who love PvP would extremely disagree with me. Most of them have to be honest with themselves. They are generally the ones that destroy the houses of others.
Yeah.
And then they never see their nicks again on the server, because to the other person it's not that much fun sometimes. It seems like such an easy flip on PvP and there's content, and it is sometimes, but you have to balance it, and it dictates every decision in the game. No wall can be higher than another wall, because then it's better. And if a cloak is dark and black, you are less visible in the night, so this is a better cloak than any other cloak. And not having PvP gives us a lot of freedom, even though of course it also brings the problem with it that we have to be very conscious how to generate enough content, because our users do not magically generate it.
Rocket beans, pen and paper, ultra core, and now working on your own game. I'm quoting this because it's not.
Yeah, it's not my game. It's 35 people. Everyone on this game is incredibly important.
But how does it feel like? You started this pen and paper, and now.
I would say, like, for context, I guess, because at Rocket Beans TV we have a show called Pen and Paper, and I am visible on that show as one of the hosts, and it was the first time that I guess the show that I was a host of got successful, and that people started recognizing me as a person and being like, oh, that's that Hauke guy from that pen and paper show. And for this show I was lucky enough to be able to experiment with various universes at some point. First we had zombies, then Vikings, and then there were some detective stories, anything possible. Over the years, whenever I had an idea that seemed cool, but either too much or too little or too big to be just a part of something else, or too small to just be the main thing, I put it in a document, and I just threw these things off the side, and that document ended up having hacker vampires that make punch cards with their teeth, and humanoids who live with dinosaurs, and dwarves who drink beer all day, and all their machinery is powered with dwarves.
So you basically wrote all of your ideas down?
Yeah, like anything that I had and didn't liked, but it was not right for this moment, I put it aside. In my office is like a whole stack of little notebooks full of ideas.
When do these ideas pop up in your head?
Creativity is a recombination of known things.
Yeah.
Everyone who says he's not creative, or like they are not creative, is just lazy. Like, I am not a very creative person. Like, I was not born a creative person.
Yeah.
I'm not even interested in creativity, or wasn't when I was younger. I didn't paint very much. What I loved was storytelling and like making up stuff. I loved that. Like, even as a child, I was fascinated by it. And when I first started being a TV editor, I struggled so much with creativity and creative writing. Like, it was just not easy. Like I said, creativity is recombination of known things. I basically take something, combine it with something, it is unusual, and people are like, wow, that's new. For example, pen and paper was born out of the idea. I was in a biological exhibition where they explained the structure of leaves. And it was like, hey, a leaf is like this, and then it goes in little... Anyways, but there is leaves that are different, where it goes, like, basically reconnects at the tip.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's fascinating. Why do some leaves do that? And algae kind of do it like that. They're like a circle rather than a thing. And I thought, kind of cool if the story would be set up that way. The story was like, at some points I can decide what's going to happen next, but it's all going to connect back to a common end, so that I can, in a TV show, present it properly and be like, here's the final end, and here's the start, and all the stuff in the middle I write. And people do not even notice. They don't know that this exists. This is behind the scenes to them. It's hidden plot. And then I thought, what format would do this? And then I realized that I've once played pen and paper. I've played the dark eye, the black eye, I think in English, the schwarze Auge.
Yeah.
I loved it, but it's clunky and weird. And it was like, oh, I had to calculate how much stuff fits in my backpack and blah. And then I said, I know people from this bubble will hate me for it, but I'm gonna get rid of all of that. That is just not fun. It is fun to some people. Some people like Excel sheets. But like generally, I felt like, let's get rid of that and make this a TV show. And so I wrote the first pen and paper. I said, hey, this is the first show. The first ones were 35 pages of never-ending storyline. Whenever someone made a decision, it just immediately was written down what's going to happen next. They were basically if and when conditions. Like, if this had happened, then now this happens, but if it didn't, then this happens. And I wrote it all down. It gave me security. That is how I learned to create media. Write it all down, follow your script. I had a suspicion that people might like it. I did not foresee how much people liked it. It was incredibly successful for our standards. I think the first time we went live, we never had more than 2,000 people watch us live. Then we suddenly had 5,000, 10,000, and then was 15,000 people who watched the first live show, which was insane numbers for us. Absolutely unimaginable that many people would watch a live stream for us back then. And it kept getting more and more. And even until today, it regularly is 23,000 for a show that is that old. That is a lot. That is, by live stream standards on Twitch, that is quite a big number. Sure, there's bigger numbers. To me, creativity is the abstraction of something that I've learned into something that might benefit from it. Making a leaf into a story, for example. And I did not invent the leaf, and I did not invent stories, and I did not invent pen and paper. I just recombine things. And that is where I get suspicious when people who say they're creative don't like cooking. To me, cooking is the absolute most basic, essential creativity. I learn how certain things work. Onions taste like this, salt makes them taste like this, and sugar is sweet. If I combine them this way, something new happens. And if I change the recipe, something else happens. So that's creativity.
I also like to freestyle.
Yes.
I also say that this is some sort of creativity.
And that's why when people call me an artist, I immediately disagree. I have in my life not created art. I'm a designer, basically. I'm a story designer.
Every time someone says to you, you're an artist, you're like, no, I'm not an artist.
If there's the room to disagree, I would say, yeah, I'm not an artist. Artist exists for the sole purpose of its existence. Artists make without knowing what they're making for, sometimes even. Which is the most interesting form sometimes. Most of the art that people create, which I highly respect, is maybe not successful. It needs a certain freedom of purpose sometimes to create art. As soon as you give me conditions, that's when I can work. And that's design. There's always an overflowing purpose to what I create. I do not write a pen and paper to have fun. I write a pen and paper for it to be an entertaining show. Everything else I don't care about. And anything that's making a chair, I have to be able to sit on it. If I take away the legs, it's technically not really a chair anymore. And that's art. If I dig a hole in it and say, wow, a chair that I can sit on is something that is questioning the idea of meaningfulness. Yeah, absolutely, that's art, but as a design piece, it doesn't work anymore. So yeah, we got off track there. Basically now saying, when I made these shows, at some point I put all these parts aside. And they all were design pieces. They were all meant for something. And then I read a very interesting article, which I sadly forgot was written by whom, because everyone asked me who wrote this. But anyways, I read an article about the ego of the author. Authors tend to put way too much meaning into stuff that we write. And the more we do, the more meaning we put into our own stuff. We get protective. And I think especially fantasy writers tend to forget how meaningless some of the stuff is that they come up with. Like, I always use the example of, there's the tree of Ogsur, and the people of Dumsur are celebrating the festivity of Yagsal. And it's some people having a party under a tree. And that is completely enough to say. To me, the perfect example is The Hobbit. The first line is, there once was a hole and in it sat a hobbit. There's not more nor neither less fantasy in it than I need. It tells me everything I need and everything I don't know yet and I want to know. I want to know what a hobbit is, I know what a hole is, why is it sitting in a hole, and why is this the first line of a story?
So you mean it's sometimes over the top?
Give me 80% of what I know, and then the other 20 you can make something up. I remember I once, what was the name of the game? I once tested a game and someone asked me, what is the game like? And I thought, and then I said, it's like you come into an endless white room and there's a 6-meter tall red chair and someone said, please sit down. You lack any context and understanding of what the hell is happening here. And that's what some fantasy universes felt like to me. And then I said, how about this? I throw my ego out the window. I don't care. I don't need to impress anyone. I am not the best author who ever roamed this earth. I'm at best mediocre even. Why do I have to prove to someone that I can reinvent fantasy? Why can dwarves not be dwarves, and elves are elves, and animals are animals? And then I said, all this is one universe. I don't care anymore. I do not need to come up with like anything that protects my hacker vampires from being in the same world with steamed dwarves that are more steampunk than anything. And then I said, okay, let's tie this together. What is a good way to tie this together? Is a common enemy. We all love that. I basically said that's how Europe works. Like, we do not like each other, even though we're absolutely all the goddamn same to everyone else. But as soon as anything comes in, we're like, yeah, hell yeah, come over here. We're the best. And I thought there must be conflict in this world, so all my main nations don't like each other, but there's something that ties them together as a common meaning, an outerworldly being. And I said, well, I need to come up with something super unique. And then I said, you know what, nah. I read an article about most Western audiences we have certain sounds we don't like. For example, and sh is sounds that we see as uncomfortable. That's why Morgoth is Morgoth in Lord of the Rings. And I said, Sorgoth, who cares? I don't need to prove to someone that I can reinvent fantasy. And so I said, yeah, there's Sorgoth the Devourer, who just dropped from the sky and started devouring people and eating everything. And the outcome was a world where the main purpose, and that's design again, at some point I realized is just fun. As long as it's fun, it has its place in this world. And then that's just how I started putting stuff together. And then we did a show with it and people loved it. I think there were universes that people resonated with before, but I've rarely created something where people loved it so much from the beginning. Because it's interesting and fun to be in a world where you understand everything immediately. Like, a hamster is a hamster, and it talks like a hamster, and it does hamster stuff, but suddenly it can also speak and read books. And like, genetics are big and have big muscles, and that's why they're kind of stupid. And it's like cliches, full of endless cliches, but it doesn't matter to me. I'm not trying to make a social statement. I'm trying to narrate a fun world. That's when I realized that this world maybe has more potential. And when we came together as a founder team for the video game now at Blankhans, there were several universes on the table. It was not that we said, let's make an ultra-core video game. Ultra-core being the name of the world. Not at all, actually. We said, this is the idea for our game. Hauke, pitch us some ideas. And generally I approach every pitch the same. I write at minimum 3 ideas, which I fully develop, which means they get at least 3 pages of text and some unique art that I go to someone and say, hey, paint me some pictures, please, here's the money. Made those, and Ultracore was on that sheet and was not even the favorite of my co-founders until they watched the show, and then they said, yeah, okay, this is really fun and cool. And that's when I learned something else about my world. I am not very funny. Which is something that sounds weird when being funny is part of my job.
Your pen and papers are sometimes so funny.
Yeah, that's not me. That's my co-hosts. What I write, I take incredibly serious. Every part of the Ultracore worlds takes itself so serious. The hammer that is running the archive of the hamster, that is like running, like Formidabulous Green is his name, absolutely 100% serious about who he is and what he is. It is super meaningful to him. There is nothing funny about it, but to us there is. And to be funny, a good fantasy world, in my opinion, needs to take itself incredibly serious, but be so over the top that you, from the outside, cannot take it serious. So that's why I called the word Tormentosia, from Torment, where I felt like this is so over the top. That's where the name came from. I was like, hardcore, megacore, ultra-core. I didn't even imagine the structure of the ultra-core first. I just said, that's a fucking cool word. Super over the top, it's ultra-core. And that's when I said, yeah, let's just go full overboard with everything. This world just takes itself way too serious. And then I thought of worlds that do that, for example, Conan, which is so funny. If you watch a Conan movie, you're like, hell is this? But if you read Conan books, you're like, oh my god, it's so over the top serious, then it's funny.
But I would say watching you playing your characters, I mean, because you're also sometimes going into character, it is so funny, Hauke. It is so good.
But it is out of the context with the others. I can be funny in interaction with others once they take over, but the worlds that I designed, the first pen and paper I wrote, the Tears one, was not funny at all. There was not a single joke in it. It was super serious. Everything I took so serious. I wrote cards that, like some of the quotes on the cards that were in that game were so serious and horrible. Like, super grim world. And then the guys dropped in and were like, la, 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 la. And I was like, yeah, okay, cool, I'll just go with it. And it was interesting when I spoke to other hosts at Rocket Beans that do pen and paper shows. There's a live show where I sat down with Florentine and Steffen. We basically sat together. They said, so when you first did it, you showed everyone that it is funny, and now everyone expects it to be fun. And when you do a pen and paper show that isn't, people are like, oh, that's so boring. It's a comedy show to them now. And then they play it at home and they play it as comedy and fun. And a lot of people hated that in the beginning. I got a lot of mean comments from people from the scene that were like, yeah, this is just not pen and paper what they're doing. It's just completely wrong. Nothing is calculated. Everything is just ridiculously funny. But yeah.
Do you like that it went into this direction? That people play it?
It might sound horrible. I think I'm
right.
I think how I play it is more fun. But they would probably say the same. And I think that's the best part about the hobby of pen and paper. You can play it whatever way you like. There's a million different rules, books. If you absolutely don't like fun and want to torture yourself as much as possible, Shadowrun exists. Yeah, you can play it and be a hacker for 60 minutes while everyone watches you. And if you don't care at all, play How to Be a Hero, which is the one that I wrote, which is now like public domain. Yeah, maybe also shout out to that team because it's a completely public domain rule set that I initially wrote but handed over to a team and they're doing whatever they want with it. And it's completely free, it's barely any rules, just do something that's fun to you. Also, I love Shadowrun, great rule set, I'm just making fun of it.
We can put it in the description.
Hauke hates Shadowrun. No, How to Be a Hero one. Yeah. But yeah, and then we basically went through the list and then they said, hey, how about we take this universe? And then we decided on the universe, knowing that some people in the German market will feel like I don't really feel like that is the game that I would have imagined from a pen and paper, because people will expect an MMORPG, something roleplay where they can do that. But to me, it was more meaningful to stay true to the actual brand, that is, don't take stuff too serious. Don't try to overcomplicate stuff and just make something that's fun.
During your career, you oftentimes got confronted with the term having a zigzag CV?
CV, yeah.
CV. What would you say are the benefits and downsides of not having everything figured out as a young adult and changing careers in general?
I think my answer will be disheartening to especially young people. It's horrible to not have stuff figured out. When I was younger, I criticized myself a lot for it. Generally, I'm someone who's very fluctuant in interests. I'm good at so many things, but not the master of any of them. In every single thing I do, there's someone who's better at it. And in the beginning, that was sometimes a problem to me. I picked up Warhammer Tabletop as a hobby. Did it for half a year and then I lost interest. And I did this and lost interest, did that, lost interest. I was just very zigzaggy in my approach to things. Because I am interested in so many things. Like, everything is just interesting to me. I want to know how a garbage truck works, and I want to know how plants grow, and I want to understand why a black hole is not as scary as people think. As good as that might sound, from my experience, it's a lot easier to focus on something, at least for a while. Even though I understand how hard it is to figure out what that is. When I was younger, it was very hard for me to commit to something immediately until I found media, where I realized this is a thing. But even then, I had several times where I was like, I did not make a lot of money. I lived in a 5 square meter apartment in Hamburg for years, basically, or a 5 square meter room in an apartment, where I realized this is like, to some people, there were no hopes for any career in that. Like, I did something for 5 years where my parents were nothing but concerned about my choice of life. I didn't care too much because I was young enough to just invest that energy, but at some point it started pushing and pulling, causing doubt. And that doubt will never go away. I'm an undereducated man. I have to say it as straight as it is. I do not have a degree from any university. It's not like I don't read or I don't watch or I don't listen, but academically speaking, I'm not well educated.
But do you think that it's that necessary?
I think a very necessary skill, even though we don't feel like it, that academics teach you, is abstraction and transfer knowledge. Understanding that, going back to that first example, a leaf might be a good way to tell a story. People are so afraid that AI takes over their job and this and that and whatever. The people in our company might not always be the absolute best at what they do, but they are really good at understanding how to make the best of what they've been given. The time, their skill set, and the assets that are at hand. And that is transfer. Putting things together in a way that is most beneficial towards the outcome. And that's the one thing I'm luckily now finally good at, but I feel like I'm good at. But I think if I would have chosen a different route, I might have been even better at it by now. Which is not saying that I think that having a zigzag like vitae is generally a problem, but it caused a lot of insecurity for me over the course of my life. Insecurity that sometimes drove me to not make the best decision, but the least scary one.
What has helped you then to find more answers about this?
I think at some point I realized that I should trust my intuition sometimes, because it seems to do me a good job. I once said to a friend, I never fail at anything, which was infuriating to them. I made them so angry. Because when you're at a point where you feel like nothing is going your way, it makes you so angry to hear someone say that. I'm just really good at forgetting that I failed. And sometimes I just don't consider something that big of a deal as failure. Like I launched an app for interactive audio. Super cool. If you find the time, it's called Campfire. It's still on the App Store. It's super cool. It's incredible. As much as our team convinced that it's a good idea and that people might really enjoy it, they didn't. No one liked it. No one bought anything. We didn't make any money. Failed. Bye. I'm like, yeah, I don't mind that much.
Yeah.
And it's not because it wasn't your money or anything, it was in big parts, but I just felt like I tried, it didn't succeed, but I also didn't feel like this is gigantic failure. I learned a lot from it.
Yeah, I was just about to say.
I think that is such a startup bro-y statement, but sometimes getting back up is almost more important than being able to get up in the first place. Because things will just fail, and not everything will lead to the biggest success ever. And be aware how long you already know that you can get back up. If you start something, and I sometimes forget that you is a very German thing. You means someone. It's a general, it's not you personally or you personally. If someone already knows that they only have 3 months of being able to try something, and if it isn't successful by then that's a problem, then that is maybe not the best setup. I know that sometimes there's no way around it. There is no other setup. But as I said, I've also not always had the wiggle room to just throw resources at something. But sometimes that's helpful to identify where it's better to focus resources right now. Like I had no hope that I would ever be able to work in media. I was a boy from a tiny village in the middle of nowhere with basically no financial funds or any way of making it in. I did not know anyone, I had no college degree, I had nothing that I had to show for. And I tried, and when I was given a chance, I realized that this might be the only chance that I will ever be given. And I did not always like my job. As nice as it might seem, being a video game tester, for example, usually means that you play games outside of your working hours. So on top of 8 to 10 hours work, you play 6 to 7 to 8 hours of video games in the evening. And not the ones you like, the ones you've been given. And I said in the beginning, we did like a weekly show. You had a piece every week in the beginning. So while you were editing one piece and filming the parts, you were already putting together, like we were still putting together the ones for the next one. And that was a lot of work for very few people. And it was absolutely fulfilling. It was an amazing team. I've rarely been as creative in my life, but it was draining. But I realized if you don't keep going, there might not be a second chance to do this. And sometimes I think not knowing what to do is interpreted by some people as being able to just jump from thing to thing to thing. And I think that's fine to do for a while. And I don't want to sound too much like a grim grown-up, but it is important sometimes to say maybe this is where it's worth committing for a while. Because most of the projects that I've worked on, I committed to for a while and then fully. I did not dance on several weddings. I think maybe it's an English saying too, but it's a German saying, which means dancing at different weddings basically means that you don't commit to something, to one thing. You're trying to do separate things at once, which will lead to you not being able to focus on one properly. And while I was freelancing, I had to do that a lot. And while I was starting to work in media, I had to do that a lot. And the less I was able to do it, the more I could be proud of the outcome.
But don't you think that in 2023, you can look up so much stuff online. You can learn so much new stuff.
Yeah.
Do you really think that you still need to go to uni or?
I would say that sadly, the restructuring of the entry to the industry does not change much how the end of the industry works. If you walk into a room full of people that have done it a certain way, they expect you to have done it the same way. We have many juniors, and a lot of them have studied at universities, some of them haven't. We have people who have never worked in the gaming industry before, and we just pointed at them and said, you're great, let's give you a try.
At Blankhans.
Yeah, at Blankhans, sorry, the company Blankhans. But that is still not the norm. Most of our seniors have studied what they work on now.
Okay,
and they were hired as seniors because they worked at other companies before where they did the same job until a point where they can call themselves senior. And if you find someone that gives you that first chance, there is an absolute route for you. But the easiest and safest route is still a proper education in the field that you want to work in.
Experience.
And it is horrible, and I understand that, and I do my absolute best to work around it. Also, to be fair to some of the companies that can give you an entry chance, should be the big ones, not the small ones, but it's the other way around. The problem with smaller companies like ours is it's an incredible risk to give you a chance. We pay you, and that money does not magically come back to us, and it hurts us a lot. Every employee costs us money that we could spend on more quality of a game that might eventually be necessary to keep the company afloat. Our official company goal is that this year's Christmas we can fly in everyone from all around around the world, because the company is international, to meet again and see each other.
Would this be the first time that you...
It's the second time that everyone sees everyone. We've done that as soon as we got founded. We immediately invited everyone to Austria for 4 days of just...
To Austria?
Yeah, we chose Austria because one of our founders doesn't fly. Okay. Also, it was the only place we found something back then. And we just said, hey, we want to have 4 days of pure quality time. No work-related stuff, no meetings, nothing. Just meet the others, shake hands, cool. Love, and enjoy that you're a human being. And the moment I hire someone in such a small company, and then they are with us for 3 months, and then they just maybe are not the right person or fail, and we have to find someone new, or... That's a risk, and we are willing to take it in some cases, but not in all of them. And someone now comes in with a stamp of approval of at least they've already invested 3 years of their life into this, which tells me they can at least commit to something for 3 years, and they have some level of education on the topic that we... And I don't want to sound too derogative, but I am very aware that a lot of university studies do not teach you anything that I need, even though that it's in the study name, but they teach you certain things, and I don't even value that much, but it is less of a risk. And even in a small company like ours, as much as I carry big titles, I'm not the only one who makes decisions, and I make decisions not for myself, but for 35 people who have kids and families and lives. And if they lose their job because I felt wiggly puffy and hired someone that I deeply believed in, even though I didn't know them, then they fail and I wasted money that I could have invested into their salary to give them a safe life. It becomes a lot scarier to be. And I know that I sound like an FDP guy, and I hate it. What hits me is the time when I have to make decisions that hurt humans that I care about. And I know they are my employees. They don't owe me anything, but I owe them that I respect their time and life. And I do not do that if I make risky decisions on their behalf that they have no influence over. And that is what a lot of small to mid-sized companies have to do. And the result is that they are not as willing to take risks as others. And the big guys, they're just assholes. That's why they don't do it. Or because they can't, because they don't have the infrastructure to actually take that risk. So they just wait until we already filtered people. And we already went through that risk assessment. And if you do not have anything to put on the table to show that you are willing to commit and that you have some skills and that you have this, it sucks. And I'm not saying you don't have them. And I know how fucking hard it is to get them and get that proof. It's such a risk for me to just believe that you have them.
The perfect sentence for the next question, because that sounds like a lot of
fun.
Responsibility. Is it your first? No, it's not your first time.
It's the first time I am a founder of a company of that size. I have led teams of similar sizes, like also led teams like maybe I didn't. I had groups of people. I've been in companies that were bigger, where I also had the same amount of responsibility, but I was not as directly involved into giving direction to the company that is so influential to the future of that company. In simple terms, usually I made decisions, but I did not gather, nor did I look over the money that is needed to make those decisions. I was just involved at keeping the money coming in.
You were talking about this in other conversations. You reached a point where you saw that you hid yourself behind other people, and then you decided, okay, I'm going full in, I'm going freelance. Or were you freelance at that time?
I am still freelance, so I assume. I've been freelance for about, I think on the side at least 11 years, of which I full-time did it 6 or 7, where I had no other sources of income, or like no other sources, where I basically declined any solid job offer and always said I want to stay freelance. I have, as much as most media people, an imposter syndrome. To people who do not know what that means, it's the constant threat that someone might find out that you actually are not able to do anything. And there is a lot of things I do not know. I am not the most qualified person to be the creative director of this company. Like, I do not know how to work an Unreal Engine. I understand the absolute basics, but I'm not able to execute tasks that are very basic. I have no proper education about video games, outside of playing them and seeing them as a journalist from the outside. I've worked on indie projects, but yeah. A few years ago, I realized the same thing about video media. The more I educated myself, the more I realized most of the time there's someone else in front of the camera. And you take the luxury of criticizing them or the development of the company because you're not mainly involved with it. You're kind of just an employee, and I'm not trying to sound derogative at all, like just an employee sounds so, but I basically leaned back and often felt like, if Rocket Beans doesn't work, I'm not rocket beans. I'm part of it and I don't want it to fail. I'll do my absolute best. But yeah, and then I was involved in Bonjour and I felt like maybe I feel emotionally connected and I care about Bonjour, but I am not Bonjour. I am part of Bonjour. And I started feeling like maybe I need something where I'm the one that makes the decisions, that takes the benefits of the good decisions, but also has to suffer from the bad ones. And I felt like, why not just try streaming? It is easy. I can do it immediately with the time that I have spare on the side. And so I just started, I think like 4 or 5 years ago at this point. I just turned on the camera and felt like maybe this is a good first approach to make myself a brand.
Yeah.
So like, here's Hauke, I'm Hauke, and this is the brand Hauke. And in the beginning it went well, like kind of immediately worked quite good, not as well as it ended up. In the end it worked a lot better even, but from the beginning people were kind of interested. I already had gathered some, let's call it fame, I guess. Like people recognized me from other projects that I was involved in. And then over the time it helped me to define more and more what I want to do. In the beginning I wanted to play games, basically like everyone does on Twitch. It was like kind of a mix of a hobby. I told myself this is a hobby, but I'll approach it like a company. I make company-based decisions about this streaming thing. And then I realized whenever I played games, the first half hour I would speak, and during that time more people watched actually, and the longer I talked the more people watched, and as soon as I turned on the game people left. And then I was like, how about I just only talk some days of the week? And then I realized that those were the strongest days. And there was a point where I said maybe I shouldn't do this, where I was like, I never wanted to be the brand Hauke. I never wanted to just sit there and just talk about my opinions on things, and they are, let's be honest, like partly informed because you don't even have the time to research everything you're talking about. You're on the fly confronted with information that you've never heard about.
But you seem very informed on your...
I did my best, especially like I did some research generally when I knew which topics are coming up. And in the beginning I approached it very much like a TV editor. I sat down, researched topics that I want to talk about this stream, did a basic research, opened a certain idea and said this is like, I sat down and wrote down a brand basically. Not properly, but I did that later. And so I tried that, it worked well, but then came a time where I was much more involved in other projects. And my passion is still content creation, where I can sit down, narrate things, present them to people and bring them joy. And I felt like I'll focus on this for a while, and then shortly after the Corona started, I was already working on a relaunch of my streaming thing. I took a pause for like 4 or 5 years, I think, 4 or 5 months, sorry, took a break. And then I had a new corporate identity, I had a new streaming setup, like visually was different, and I had set up a brand. I decided my brand is this and that. My brand is peaceful, it is open, it is inclusive, my brand is not not aggressive, my brand is not derogative, I do not swear. People come in and it's feel-good content. I've tried to take my ego back and say this is second screen content. I don't care if you're working on the side, or if you're baking, or cooking, or watching another show, or playing a video game. I do not need to be the center of your attention. I'm just there, with you. You want to talk to me for a moment, you can talk to me. If you don't have to. And that's how I approach streaming.
Now that you're saying that, I remember when I also looked into your Twitch, for example. I remember like, I don't know, I was cooking or something like that, and I had you at the laptop on the side, and I was listening and like, okay. I
mean, as much as it doesn't seem like it, most of the time the stream was very much set up in certain spikes. There was a 5-minute spike. A 5-minute spike is me getting a little louder, opening a topic, making it at least partly interesting to you, a call to action, like how do you feel about this, generally being emotional because people like sharing emotions. One of the biggest learnings is we all know most about ourselves, so we love talking about ourselves because it's easy. We're comfortable doing it. So if I ask you, what do you know about bananas? You know, I don't know, who cares? But if I ask you, so do you like bananas? You're more inclined to tell me the answer. If I say, do you like bananas as much as I do? Are you as in love with bananas as I am? You're very inclined to agree or disagree. I immediately have your attention and I have a call to action where I say, I want to hear your answer to this. And I honestly cared about that answer. And I think that is what worked very well. So after these 5 minutes, there was a 30-minute lower one where we generally just talked, tried to keep the topic going. I could listen to people, interact with people, actually read their answers, which was a point where I realized this is user-generated content. I am not the content. I am talking to people, reading their answers, interacting with it. That's the content. And then came a 15-minute build-up, or like 5 to 15-minute build-up, which was generally something completely different. Next topic. And over time, as it is with creative work, I started getting tired of it. And then I invested less work and less energy and became tiring to do it. And I started getting defensive about opinions. And it just started not giving me the joy that it used to give. And it was, I mean, it is work. It's not always supposed to be just fun, but it still felt like I'm not good at this work anymore. And that's when I realized that I should maybe take a step back and say, hey, then it's been a nice ride. Maybe I'll come back to it one day. Maybe I won't. Let's focus on other projects now.
I saw the reaction of your community back then. They seem very understandable.
I mean, generally, most influencers are mostly humans. You are human as a brand. And I think there's people who are very good at separating the influencer human from the actual human and who are very much like very professional approach to it. And a lot of the Hauke in front of a camera was the actual Hauke. But there's also just me as a person, who I am with my friends and who I want to be. And I felt like my on-air persona is starting to take a toll on the person that I want to be around the human, like to the humans around me. Like sometimes people ask me what's the purpose of life, and I think the answer to that is incredibly simple. It is to give as much joy to as many people as possible, including myself. And I did not feel like I was doing that. I felt like I'm giving joy to some people, not to the maximum amount of people that I could give it to, and especially not to myself anymore. And that's when I thought maybe then it's time to take a step back and do something else and let other people who are better at it do that for me.
When I see a video of you can see your community, not even on your own.
No, yeah. I mean, and I'm incredibly grateful.
What are some key things to nurture such a good community, to build up such a great community?
I mean, the easiest way to make people care about you is to care about them. Like, I guess I always did my best to be honest with the people that I talk to and respect them. Don't trick them, don't see them as stupid, don't try to see them as a number on the screen. And whenever I realize that I don't fully respect the whole audience anymore, or I immediately get defensive towards certain parts of the audience, I felt like, is this really what you want to do? Why do you make things for people that you don't respect? The problem might not be them, but me. Of course, there's really good reasons to have parts of audiences that you don't want to interact with, that are toxic towards you or others. It's a small part of a gigantic group. From the beginning till the eventual end, I have to remember, and I want to remember, that everything I do, I'm only able to do because there's people who care about it. And if I'm not able to care the same amount, maybe it's not a good work to do anymore. I always remember, I was at the Gamescom in Germany. Like, to people who have never been, it's one of the biggest, it's actually the biggest audience-based gaming event in the world. Most of the other conventions are professional conventions. You can only go as a part of the industry. But Gamescom, you can actually go as someone. Maybe that changes from year to year, but for several years it's been the biggest one. And I was there and someone approached me, and at that time I wasn't even like in front of cameras regularly, but still people started realizing who I am. And then someone came up to me and that person asked if we can take a picture. And I said, yeah, of course. And that person, like, I asked, hey, can I put an arm around you just like for the picture? And I'm like, yeah, sure. I put my arm around that person was shaking. It is a good reminder for me always that the fact that to me it is one interaction in 1,000 does not mean that it's the other way, it's the same way for the other side. If someone comes into my Twitch chat and says something, I have absolutely no right to disrespect them or disregard their opinion if they put it in a respectful way. And I started doing that. I started not being interested in the opinion of people or like generalizing them into, even if I meant them as comedic groups, where like I used to say like YouTube Kevin, for example, which was to me the general YouTube user that I am too, that doesn't understand anything, it doesn't care, and if the link is not right in front of my face, I'll not click on it and be like, where's the link? And like the top comment is the link. I started doing that and I felt like, oh, that's not really enjoyable. And to that person that might feel so, they like brought up the courage and the energy to text me, interact with me, or ask me for a picture, and I should have the respect for them to make them feel that I care about that. And understand at some side, like, at a certain reach, you are too big to always do that. And there's influencers like PewDiePie who say, I don't want to take pictures anymore. 100% understandable, but I am far from that. It is completely fine to ask me for a picture or to come into my Twitch chat and say, hey, I don't really agree with your opinion.
But I think sometimes it's also difficult because there are so many opinions online. It's not that easy sometimes, I get that.
I think the vast majority of people in this world have a very healthy and good understanding of how human interaction works and how much it is respectful. But there is some people who sometimes forget or who never fully understood how other people do it. And that is of course exhausting sometimes, but it is just not the general rule. In addition to that, I think sometimes people like to use it as a great excuse, like whoever's in the public eye has to deal with that. I disagree. I don't think that someone making a decision magically frees you from any moral responsibility towards other human beings. Like you cannot walk around and tell people you like freedom of speech. And freedom of consequences of your speech are two separate things. And the consequence of your freedom of speech might be that someone else does not want to speak to you anymore. And that does not limit your freedom of speech. That limits the audience that you can have it to. And you have zero right to an audience as a human being. No one owes you their ear.
Yep, I was just about to say that.
And
people owe you shit.
As much as like influencers sometimes earn it by being available and providing content and everything, as much is it within their absolute normal right to say, I do not want to listen to this anymore. I don't think it's always the best way to approach it, and I also did that wrong often, but still it is within the limitations of, it's within their rights. So often people tell me, the culture of discourse is going down the drain and this and that. I think there's a very general rule that I would love for more people to understand, and that is your emotions are yours and not a fact to me yet. And making them reality is not my job, but it is yours. If you want me to understand how you feel, you have to explain it to me with things that I understand. And you not liking something is not a factual statement towards the existence of something. You saying that the coronavirus seems unreal to you does not give me any job to explain to you why the opposite of the case is the other way around. If you don't want to do that, that is totally fine. And if I don't want to do that, that is totally fine. But if one of us decides that we don't want to have that conversation that way, it is within the rights of the person that currently delivers the stage, which is in the case of a Twitch chat, for example, streamer who has the Twitch chat, it is completely fine for them to say, maybe you don't have time on the stage now. I think that is where I struggled at some point. And I think there's people who are better at it than I am, who I have a lot of respect for, that they can keep doing it. I can't. I don't have the energy, and maybe this is horrible to say, I'd rather invest that energy into people who are closer to me.
No, I get that. Okay, we were talking about a lot of jobs, stuff you did, or you're still doing. How do you feel about, because you're still doing different things, like working on a video game, but you also worked
video productions as like an influencer recently. I still do a live show for Rocket Beans TV. Sometimes I do podcasts.
Also traveling.
Not much anymore recently. Like I've been to Hokkaido recently, which was like a travel influencer job thing. To be fair, most of the work there was done by my camera woman Delphina. I basically was there and sometimes smiled. There were a few years where I really liked it. I loved having several jobs at the same time, and that is kind of like backtracking to when you asked, hey, how's a zigzag and the whole imposter thing. Most of the time I did so many jobs because I was so scared to lose them. Because I was so scared that what if one of them doesn't exist anymore, then I have to still work tomorrow. And that is freelance life. That you take jobs that you don't want because you're so scared that if you don't say no, yes now, next time they won't ask. With time you get more confident to say no to certain things, which is good, and maybe it's an ongoing journey, who knows, but currently I feel like I'm getting pretty good at saying no to most of the stuff, but it results in less people asking. So now I'm scared again that I will not have a job maybe. So what if the game fails, which of course can happen. We're an indie studio, we're releasing a game this year in early access, might fail, then it failed, happens. And like, I think generally it's a bigger deal to people than it is to the people who actually were in the company, because to me it's an emotional punch, but professionally I'll do a new job and try again, most likely. Currently I'm happy that I don't have to do that anymore, but I never really hated it when I had to do it. It was just exhausting sometimes.
This is something we do in Artist Insights, talking about another artist. Do we have an artist for us you want to present, you want to talk about, give a shout out?
Damn, shit, I forgot about that one. There's a lot of artists that I actually really like. I mean, there's of course a lot of artists on our team.
You can also give them a shout out. Someone who has not that much of a following.
Michelle is really good, but she has some kind of a following.
Who's Michelle?
Silver Party Pants, I think, is her Instagram handle. Michelle is a very good friend of mine that's actually going to visit me next week. I met Michelle on the Gamescom. At the Gamescom, we were standing in front of, I think it was my first Gamescom ever, because I recently realized I know her for like 10 years now or something. Okay. And she was suddenly standing next to us in the audience. Then she asked us, hey, aren't you these guys from Rocket Beans TV? Then we started a conversation and learned that she snuck in through the basement in a parking lot where she just showed someone a card that said the word Sony and said she works at the Sony booth. And that person was like, oh yeah, sure, and let her in. And so she was at Gamescom alone with no tickets.
Nice.
Then Michelle studied several things, I think psychology, geology, art, and something else. Like she kind of studies everything. And she's an artist. She's done a job for, I think, like several things. makes really big...
So illustrations?
Yeah, she's an illustrator. Incredibly talented person, very, very cool approach to things. She is maybe the weirdest human I know. In a very good way. It's very weird, in the best ways possible. Really good artist. Can I do several?
Okay.
Bas is also really good. He did the illustrations for my graphical package on my stream. And Bas also works for Google, Spotify. Really cool, unique art style. And then I'll just forget the last David. David is our 3D creative director, or like 3D lead. I think that's senior 3D artist. Worked for Sea of Thieves before. I don't think has much of an audience himself. David Rones, or Ronnes, Dutch name, who lives in Europe still, was very much involved with the art style of our game. We've been struggling very much to unify it, find something that we actually like. And now I feel like, I mean, sometimes you can just be on. I think our game is absolutely stunningly beautiful. It looks great. Of course, there's room for improvement always, but it looks great. It is a stylized approach. We call it simplified realism. Some people might be derogatory. Yeah, it looks like Fortnite. Also, sorry, Fortnite is a beautiful game. Like, there's a reason it's so successful. But yeah, he was very much involved with that. Incredibly talented. I sometimes feel like if I say talented, it sounds like they've been magically given this. But yeah, no, incredibly skilled artist himself. Very good leadership skills. Good human being. And like, I'm very glad he's with us. I could say that about several people on our team, but he's one of them ones that had a big influence of making the game as nice as it is. And yeah, our alpha was very well received, but most outstanding was that people said, I love this world, it looks gorgeous, it's absolute fun to explore it, and that was out of the feedback that we got the most outstanding, and I think that is in huge parts David's achievement.
Yeah, I mean, you already also showed a lot of art.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's really nice, really beautiful. Okay, last question. We were talking about that, but what would you like to give our creative viewers on their way who have a hard time in finding their calling? Maybe that's the imposter that I feel like, am I the right one to give that advice? Because I'm still on my journey myself. The best advice that I've been given was that, like, maybe that's just not only creative, but in general, you are not the only one that's feeling this. Like, it is completely normal to be not safe or like not sure about something, to think that your work is garbage, to throw away stuff, to restart work, or to be sad and disappointed when people do not love something that you care about so much. And you are, like, it sounds so mean, you're not special, but you're not special. You're one of us and one of many, and everyone else dealt with it too, which doesn't mean that it's not hard or that it's not punishing, but it is not something wrong with you that makes you fail right now. It is just something not working, and maybe it's now going back at it and looking at it and changing it. Don't be too defensive about your work. If people don't like it, maybe the reason they don't is good, and you should listen to it and try to change it. And if you disagree with their observations, then release it somewhere else and be stubborn about it as long as you can. Yeah, I mean, it's good to ask some more people. You don't always have to ask other people. Yeah. But like you said, you have to get a feeling of how it's going. Now that I work with so many creative people in one company, I'm basically leading a lot of them. Each of them is individually better at everything that I tell them to do. I just happen to be the person that aligns the vision with them. That means that most of the time I make a decision, and it might be wrong, and I honestly tell them that I'm just making the decision that I think is best right now, and if they disagree, they should tell me. And if you're making something and you think your audience is your audience, then don't see their criticism as them not understanding. Sometimes maybe you're just not explaining it right. And it's totally fine that they don't like what you just made. That's a good answer. If you want to see more of our conversation, you can become part of my friends community on Patreon, because Hauke and I created a second video as well. By the way, you can edit or cancel your pledge anytime you want. Link is in the description. Hauke, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Participating in this format, and thanks for asking me, thanks for listening. We will see each other in my next video. Bye!